Knitting. Knitting is a quite interesting technique and very easy to learn, but it needs a little bit of practice to get fast with it because it is a little more challenging than, for example, crochet, because with knitting we work with needles that don't have any hook at the end, so the yarn slips off that tip very easily and whatnot. So at first it needs quite a little bit of practice. But it's very rewarding because you can knit almost anything. You can even knit a coat for your tree outside or something. So the first instruction I want to give you is about the cast on. And the cast on is usually our first row in a garment. Like if we look at like a sweater I just finished recently. So the cast on is basically down at the bottom here, and it's the first row. So, and from here on we build up our knitting piece all the way to the top. So I want to show you how to do that the easiest way, in my opinion. Because, and I say that because there are so many different ways how to cast on. But in the long run, I happen to go always back to this technique versus any other. So at first I will define about how much I have to cast on. So if it's like 50 loops or 120, it really depends on the project and the size of your yarn. So for each 10 loops, I would go about 4 inches of yarn and then calculate all the extra that I want for my cast on. So let's say I want to do like 20 loops just for this sample piece. So I take like 10, 20. So, and then I start here. So if I do 60, I do 30, 40, 50, 60, and so on. So in the ideal world, the needles that you use for knitting should be about the same thickness as our yarn. It's very similar to crochet, but in my case, like I am a very tight knitter, so I always go like 2 sizes up, and that is for any kind of my projects. Like my needles are always way thicker than the yarn. But if you are a beginner and you have no idea if you knit loosely or very tightly, then just keep it about the same. You know, the thickness of your yarn should be the thickness of your needles. So that said, now we have our little tail here for 20 loops, and I will start like that. So I will get my yarn in between my pinky and my ring finger. Then I wrap it around my index finger, and I come around my thumb in a figure 8, like that. And then I hold it here with 2 or 3 fingers. So this is my starting position. And I'm not like, don't cramp up. This is kind of the worst that can happen if you hold on, you know, and cramp up with your hand. So I parallel my needles. And the reason for doing that is that it creates bigger loops. So my loops that I cast on now are double the size actually what I need later. And that makes it very easy for my first row to do. Some theories or some people, they cast on with 1 needle. That has the disadvantage that my loops are exactly the same as the outside of my needle here, the outer circumference, but then it's very hard to do the first row. So that's why I double it. So I double my needle, and then I go into my little figure 8 loop here that goes around my thumb, and I grab like this loop here, and I grab this yarn that comes around from my index finger, and I pull that through my figure 8 loop around the thumb. Then I let go and I tighten that. So this is my very first loop. And as you see now, everything is still in place except the loop around my thumb. So my next one is I go around and create another loop with my thumb like this. Then I go in here at the bottom, grab this yarn, loop around the yarn that comes from my index finger, and I drag it or pull it through. Let go of the thumb and tighten it. So now I have 2. And I do that again and again till I have 20. 3, 4, 5, 6. So now I have 20 loops on my needle, and then I can start my project. So this could be a very narrow scarf or a belt or just a sample piece to see what my cast on will be for a bigger project. So the next thing is that I pull one of those needles out. So I have all my loops on my needle here. And you can see they are very loose, and that is exactly what we want. So we want that very loose, so the first row that we are doing now is very easy to do. So the first stitch that I want to show you is a knit. So we have knit and purl, and basically all the stitches there are in knitting are based on either knit or purl. So it is very simple basically. So if you know those 2 stitches, you can do basically all the variations there are. So for my knit, I will grab my yarn, do the same thing as I did before. I go in between my pinky and my ring finger, and I wrap it around my index finger like twice, and then I just, or 3 times, and then I just hold my knitting piece on the left side. So I already explained that when we did crochet. This whole wrapping around the finger and sliding it in between the finger and whatnot, it's all about the tension that you want to have for your loops. Because ideally we want to have the same tension for each loop. So each loop is about the same size. And when you look at my sweater again, you know, when you look at the result, so those loops, they are pretty much all the same, or pretty much all the same. So not exactly, that is a nice variation to it, but they are not all over the place. So you want to have a very consistent look, so that all of them look like, you know, like very smooth. Okay, so I will go back to my little thingy here, you know, the wrap around my hand. Then I hold it in my left hand. So with the left hand, and the first row that I already did is facing towards me. So then I grab my second needle here, and it doesn't matter if you use those needles, you know, that are connected or 2 individual ones. It really doesn't matter. So your second needle goes in your right hand. So what we do now for the knit, you know, we go in to our first loop here, and we go in from the left to the right. So we go in here and we just grab that loop from the left to the right. So we go in here, and then in the back we grab this yarn that comes down from my index finger, and then we pull this through. And then we lift it over to the right side. So again, so that was my first knit. Again, we go in from the left to the right and grab the front loop here, not both of them, you know, only the front part of the loop. And then we grab the back yarn here that comes from my index finger and pull it through and lift it over to the right. Again, left to right, grab it and pull it through. So we go all and do all those without letting go of anything. So we just, you know, like lift it off and get it to the right side. So the nice thing about doing the cast on with a double needle is that those loops are really nice and big. So it is very easy to get into here. If you had done the cast on with only one needle, you know, this getting into the needle and grabbing that loop and pull it through is really hard to do, especially for a beginner. So that's why I really advocate trying it with a double needle. So, and now we are at the end. Again, we go from left to right, grab it and pull it through. So now we did our very first row. So now you see all of a sudden it's basically the width that we will have in the end. So this is my final width here. Before, you know, when you have the cast on and whatnot, you cannot really tell how wide this whole thing will be, but now it gets more realistic that way. So I just showed you the knit stitch. And the knit, when you look at a knitted piece here, so the knit, if you have a close-up here, you can see it's made of all little V's. It looks like a little V, 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 you know, like all of them like are flat and those little V's are visible. So this is my knit side. In order to get the knit, I will do one row of knit and then turn over and do one row of purl. Then I'm in the front again, one row of knit, then turn over one row of purl. Purl stitches on the other side. This is the inside of my sweater. Like if you get a close-up look on purl, you see they are all little loops here, all little knots. So a purl looks a little more three-dimensional in a way. It's not so flat. So, and it has all those little loopy loops. So some people prefer the purl, some people prefer the look of a knit side, you know, and you can do whatever you want. Some people prefer both of them. So if you only knit with knit stitch back and forth, then you end up with a purl and knit look here. That's what I have here in the center part of my sweater. So you see, like there is the knit row and then there is the purl, the knit and the purl row. So, and if I continue just with knit, because I like knitting with knit only, then it will look like that. Or for my other project that's in the making right now, this is also made with knit only. And if you stretch it out a little bit, you can see that there is the purl row in between. So that is basically just knit stitches. So I will just continue doing another row of knit, and then I will show you the purl stitch. So if you look, oops, that's my end piece. If you look a little closer, you can see all those V's here. Okay, now I will go and show you the purl stitch. So I flip my work over. So that's the thing with knitting, you know, you always knit from the left side to the right, then you flip it over and you work again from the left to the right. So you always work from the left to the right. So now we want to do the purl stitch. So we do the same thing with our hand, you know, wrap the yarn around our fingers the same way as we did before. Hold it in your left hand. So what we do now, we will put our yarn to the front of our work. So it was always in the back, and now we put it in the front to do the purl stitch. And then we not go in from the left to the right, but from the right to the left. And we go behind this yarn here that we just put in the front and through the loop, through that first loop, the front of the loop. So we have 2 yarns in the front here. Then we grab that and pull it through. So again, we put the yarn in the front. We go in from the right to the left. You see 2 yarns in the front. Then we grab this one from the index finger and pull it through. Again, yarn in the front. We go in from the right to the left, get the yarn from the index finger, and that's where my thumb sometimes comes in as a little helper. So I hold it in place now so it doesn't slip off my needle. So I grab that, pull it through. And that's how you do the purl stitch. Let me just finish that row. And then I show you how it looks like. I mean, it's really, once you're more experienced, you don't even look when you do like simple knit or yarn patterns like that one. Really doesn't need you to look later on, not at first. So what we did now is the purl stitch, and you see all those bubbles here, you know, those little knots, versus the purl, the knit side, where you end up having all those V's here. And then you can go on and on and on. Some interesting patterns, you know, if you do 1 knit, 1 purl, 1 knit, 1 purl, then you get a very stretchy elastic that you often use as a hem for your sweaters or, you know, at a jacket or something. There are like endless variations of patterns just out of those 2 basic stitches. So this is basically knitting. And once you decided, okay, I'm finished now, I want to cast off, like I want to end my piece. So that is another row I will show you. So the cast on and cast off, these are a little different, but also based on our knit and purl pattern. So I wrap my yarn around my finger the same way. And since I'm on my knit side, I will use the knit stitch for casting off. If you are on your purl side, you might want to use your purl stitch, same thing. First I do my knit stitch from the left to the right. I grab my yarn, pull it through, and I do that again. I need 2 loops on my right side for the cast off. And then with my left needle, I go in the first stitch here, not the second one, the first one, and I pull it over the second one. So again, I have 1 on my right side, now I get a second one on my right side. You always need 2 loops on your right side. Then I go in with my left needle. I go into the first stitch here and pull that first stitch over my second one and then let go. So again, I get a second stitch over. I pull the first one over the second one. So in that way you eliminate one stitch after the other, and in the end you have a nice like finished row that looks a little like the chain stitch at a crochet piece. So that's really very nice finish, and it looks very decorative. If you decide to add on something, you can all very easily grab those chain stitch loops and, you know, create another piece on that. So I'm almost done here with a cast off row. And you know, keep it loose, don't pull too hard and don't make the loops too tight, because then it is very hard and your cast off row is narrower and less stretchy than the rest of it, so you don't want that to happen. You want the cast off row be as stretchy as the rest of your piece. So now we have my very last loop here, and the very last one I can just pull my leftover yarn through that and pull a little closer. So you see that is my cast off line. It's stretchy as the rest of the piece, and when you look closer you see that it has that chain stitch detailing that we know from crochet and from other projects. Okay, so this is my quick tutorial for knitting, and I hope you get the bug and knit a lot. Thank you.